Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive.
Yeah.
This time we're taking a look at Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Feck.
This is a good one.
So, right off the bat, that title,
Yeah.
it can be a little misleading.
It's a little provocative, for sure.
Yeah, it's not about being indifferent
No.
or just ignoring everything around you.
Not at all.
It's much more about being very intentional and careful with where you choose to invest your energy.
Exactly. Yeah, it's about choosing your battles wisely, figuring out what truly matters to you, and giving those things your attention.
Okay, so Manson, he kicks things off with this story about Charles Bukowski, the writer.
Right.
And Bukowski was known for being brutally honest
Yeah.
about his, let's just say, less than glamorous lifestyle.
Yeah, for sure.
And the kicker is that his tombstone reads, "Don't try,"
Yeah.
which seems a little counterintuitive for a self-improvement book, right?
A little bit, yeah.
What's the takeaway there?
Yeah, so I think the real insight here is that Bukowski's strength came from his radical self-acceptance. Like, he didn't waste energy trying to fit into someone else's mold of what success or happiness should look like.
Right.
He owned his so-called flaws and turned them into art.
Absolutely. And in a world that's so obsessed with this image of perfection,
Oh, yeah.
that's a powerful message, right?
Hugely powerful.
Just to be authentically yourself, imperfections and all. Which actually brings us to another point that Manson makes.
Yeah.
He talks about how we live in a society that creates this feedback loop from hell
Yeah.
when it comes to our emotions.
Absolutely.
We're bombarded with all these messages about how we should feel.
Yes.
And then we end up feeling bad about feeling bad.
Exactly. We get trapped in this cycle of anxiety fueled by these societal expectations.
So it's like feeling bad about feeling bad about feeling bad.
Exactly.
And this is where the not giving a feck part comes in.
Right.
It's about saying, okay, I recognize these negative feelings. They're there.
They're a part of life.
I'm going to acknowledge them, and then I'm going to make a conscious choice to move on.
Yeah.
So short-circuiting that loop, breaking free from that cycle.
That's it.
Now, this might sound a little strange, but Manson argues that happiness actually comes from solving problems.
Okay.
And he uses this funny example
Yeah.
of a granny throwing a tantrum in the grocery store over a 30-cent coupon.
I love that story.
It might seem trivial to us,
Right.
but to someone like that granny who might not have many meaningful challenges in her life,
Yeah.
that tiny coupon
Yeah.
becomes a huge deal.
It becomes her Everest.
Yeah, exactly. So it's
Yeah.
like what we choose to care about actually has a huge impact on our overall happiness.
For sure.
And this leads into one of Manson's key points.
Yeah.
It's not about living a pain-free life.
Right.
It's about choosing the right struggles.
Choosing the struggles that align with your values. Yeah.
And he actually uses an example from his own life to explain this.
Oh, yeah.
He talks about wanting to be a rock star. He was convinced that this was like his path to fulfillment.
Right. And he failed miserably.
We did, yeah.
Why?
Well, because deep down, he didn't actually enjoy the process.
As is the fantasy of it.
Yeah, just the fantasy of the outcome.
And I think this is something that we all do.
We all do.
We
yeah.
get so caught up in like the what ifs and the should be's
Yeah,
that we lose sight of what we truly value
absolutely.
and what we're actually willing to put in the work for.
100%.
So to kind of help us figure this out, our
Yeah.
values and motivations, Manson introduces this idea of the self-awareness onion.
I love this.
It's such a good analogy.
Yeah.
Can you break it down for us?
Yeah, so the outer layer of the onion is like what we do right.
Okay.
It's our actions and feelings.
Okay, that's the
The
surface.
surface level, yeah.
Okay.
The next layer goes a bit deeper, and it's about why we think our actions or feelings are right or wrong.
Oh, our justifications.
Yeah, exactly, our justifications.
Okay.
But then we get to the core, the third layer.
The juicy part. The juicy part. And these are our values, right?
Right.
These are the fundamental beliefs that drive everything else.
It's the why behind the why.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
And Manson argues that understanding this deepest layer is crucial
Yeah,
because it determines the quality of our problems and ultimately the quality of our lives.
that makes sense.
Right.
So how do we actually use this onion?
Okay, so to bring this concept to life,
Yeah.
Manson shares an example from his own life.
Okay.
He was annoyed that his brother wasn't responding to his messages.
Happens to the best of us?
It does, and so he starts dissecting this.
Oh, so he's like peeling back the layers of the onion?
He is. He's peeling back those layers, and he realizes that the underlying value was his desire for a close relationship with his brother.
Okay.
But then he went a step further and questioned the metric he was using to define closeness.
Ooh, Ooh, that's interesting.
Right, was constantly texting, really the best way to measure that.
Right.
It made him reevaluate what was truly important in that relationship.
Wow. So by digging deeper into his own motivations, he was able to gain a new perspective
Totally.
and potentially even change his approach.
Yeah.
That's powerful stuff.
It is. And this brings us to another point Manson makes
Okay.
about the difference between good values and bad values.
Now, I'm curious, what makes a value good or bad?
So good values are rooted in reality.
Okay.
They're socially constructive, immediate, and within our control.
So it's something we can actually influence.
Exactly. For
Okay.
example, honesty, that's a good value.
Okay.
Because it's something we can choose to practice every day, regardless of our circumstances.
I like that, yeah.
Whereas a bad value would be something like popularity,
Okay. Because
because it's based on other people,
Yeah.
on the opinions of others.
something we can't directly control.
Exactly. And chasing popularity can lead to a lot of unhappiness.
Makes sense.
Because you're always seeking validation from external sources.
You're at the whim of everyone else.
Totally.
It's like a roller coaster.
Yeah, it is.
So focusing on internal values, like honesty, should theoretically lead to a more stable and fulfilling life.
Right. It's about taking ownership of our own values and actions.
Which brings us to another fascinating concept from the book,
Oh, yeah.
the responsibility fault fallacy.
This one's good.
So this is where Manson flips the script. Instead of that classic saying, with great power comes great responsibility.
Right.
He says, with great responsibility comes great power.
I love that.
It's like a mind shift.
It is.
We may not be at fault for everything in our lives,
Right.
but we are always responsible for our choices and reactions in the present moment.
Yeah, it's like shifting from a victim mentality to a state of empowerment.
Instead of dwelling on the past or blaming others, we focus on what we can control right now.
Exactly. And that's a game changer.
Yeah, because when we take responsibility for our present choices,
Yeah,
we actually gain the power to shape our future.
absolutely.
Manson then dives into the dangers of certainty.
Okay.
He tells this story about a woman named Erin, who's absolutely convinced she can cure death.
Wow.
And it highlights how clinging to absolute certainty, even in self-improvement, can be really blinding and potentially harmful.
Yeah.
And this actually connects to some research by the psychologist Roy Baumeister.
Okay.
He found that feeling good about ourselves despite our negative actions can actually fuel destructive behavior.
Oh, that's interesting.
So this is a real danger of unwavering certainty.
Oh, you're right.
We don't see the need to change, so we never actually grow.
Makes sense.
So a healthy dose of self-doubt can actually be a good thing.
Absolutely.
It keeps us open to questioning our beliefs and being wrong,
Right.
which ultimately leads to growth.
It does. And you know what else helps with growth?
What's that?
Embracing failure.
Ooh.
Manson tells a great story about Picasso giving a woman a doodle on a napkin and then charging her a hefty price for it.
Wait, what? Why?
So when she questioned the price, Picasso explained that she wasn't just paying for the doodle itself, but for all the years of experience, the failures, the lessons he'd learned that allowed him to create that doodle in the first place.
Wow, I love that.
It's amazing, right?
It's like he's saying the path to mastery
Yeah.
and fulfillment
Is paved with.
is paved with mistakes and setbacks.
Totally.
And, thinking about embracing failure and learning from it reminds me of a platform called the Growth Reads.
Oh, yeah.
They're all about, personal growth through the power of books,
It's a great concept.
diving deep into insightful reads,
Mhm.
sharing key takeaways,
Yeah.
and actionable advice for people who are looking to grow personally and professionally.
Love it.
Yeah, I bet our listeners would find them valuable.
Absolutely. You can find them at thegrowthreads.com.
We'll definitely have to check them out.
Yeah.
But for now, let's take a short break
Okay.
and then come back and unpack even more insights from the subtle art of not giving a feck.
Sounds good. So we've talked about choosing our struggles, but how do we actually do that? How do we figure out what to give a feck about?
Yeah, it's easy to say choose your battles, but then you're like, okay, how?
Right. So Manson says our values should be based on reality. They should be socially constructive.
Okay.
And this is key. They should be immediate and controllable.
So things we can actually influence, not things outside of our control.
Exactly. So for example, honesty is a good value because it's completely within our control. It's about how we choose to act. Whereas something like popularity would be a bad value to focus on.
Right.
Because it relies on other people's opinions. It's not something you can directly control.
Yeah, you're at the whim of everyone else.
Oh, yeah.
And that ties back to taking responsibility for our choices.
Absolutely. Not basing our self-worth on external validation.
Remember the responsibility fault fallacy.
Yeah. Manson really emphasizes this throughout the book.
He does. So don't waste time blaming others or dwelling on the past.
Right.
Focus on what you can do right now to change things.
Exactly. And he gives this example.
Oh, yeah.
A guy who blames his height for his lack of success in dating.
Oh, yeah.
And he avoids taking any responsibility for his own actions.
Classic victim mentality.
Yeah, he prefers to see himself as a victim of circumstance.
Which keeps him stuck.
Keeps him stuck, yeah.
So by refusing to take responsibility and focusing on something he can't control,
Right.
he's just perpetuating his own misery.
Exactly.
It's a powerful reminder that true empowerment comes from owning our choices,
Yeah.
no matter what's happened in the past.
Absolutely.
Manson also gets into some really interesting stuff about trust
Oh.
and how it relates to responsibility. He uses infidelity as an example.
Right.
What were your thoughts on that section?
That was insightful. So he argues that when trust is broken, rebuilding, it is a two-step process.
Okay.
First, the person who broke the trust needs to acknowledge the values that led to their betrayal.
Right. So own up to it.
And own up to them, yeah.
Okay.
But then, of course, words aren't enough.
Right.
They need to demonstrate a consistent track record of changed behavior.
Actions speak louder than words.
Exactly. Rebuilding trust requires genuine effort and proof that you've changed. And it made me think about setting boundaries in relationships, too.
Boundaries are so important.
Yeah, and Manson talks about how unhealthy relationships often involve people trying to solve each other's problems
Interesting.
as a way to feel good about themselves.
So it's like avoiding taking responsibility for their own well-being.
Exactly. It creates this codependent dynamic where they're not supporting each other's individual growth.
It's almost like enabling in a way.
It is.
So instead of being supportive partners, they become each other's emotional crutches.
Yeah.
But in a healthy relationship,
Yeah.
partners can support and encourage each other.
Of course.
But they ultimately take responsibility for their own happiness.
Yeah, and for their own problems.
They recognize that they can't control their partner's emotions.
Right.
Or expect their partner to fix them.
Absolutely. It's about fostering a sense of interdependence, not codependence.
I like that.
Now, shifting gears a bit, Manson talks about the role of uncertainty in personal growth.
Yeah, and he cautions us against clinging to absolute certainty.
He does, even in our pursuit of self-improvement.
Yeah, he uses this fascinating example
Oh, yeah.
of Erin, this woman who is totally convinced she can cure death.
It's wild, right?
Yeah, and it shows how unwavering certainty can be blinding and even dangerous.
It can lead to delusion
Yeah,
and prevent us from seeing things clearly.
and it ties back to what we were talking about with the Baumeister research.
Mm-hmm.
Remember how feeling good about ourselves, despite negative actions, can fuel bad behavior.
Right, that's the trap of certainty.
It prevents self-reflection
Yeah.
and stunts growth.
So it all comes full circle.
It does.
Manson offers some questions to help us challenge our certainty.
Okay, I like to give me some examples.
Like, what if I'm wrong?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Right. Just asking that can open our minds to different perspectives.
Forces us to step outside of our own limited viewpoints.
Totally. Another one is, what if I'm the problem?
Oh, that's a tough one to ask.
It is, but it can be so illuminating.
It really encourages personal accountability.
Absolutely.
I like it.
He also encourages us to ask, what if this doesn't matter? To help us detach from values that are causing us unnecessary pain.
So questioning those beliefs and seeing if they're truly serving us
Exactly.
or just holding us back.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned earlier how Manson emphasizes embracing failure.
Yeah.
And he has this great anecdote about Picasso.
Oh, yes, the doodle on the napkin.
Yeah, can you remind me of that story?
So Picasso gives this woman a doodle on a napkin
Mm-hmm.
and then charges her like an exorbitant price for it.
Right. It seems so strange.
It did, but when she questioned the price, Picasso explained that she wasn't just paying for the doodle itself.
Okay.
She was paying for his years of experience, his failures, the lessons he'd learned.
That is such a brilliant way to look at it.
Isn't it?
It reinforces the idea that failure is not something to be feared or avoided.
Right.
It's an essential part of the journey
Totally.
towards mastery.
You know, this reminds me of the growth reads again.
Uh-huh.
They really emphasize the importance of continuous learning and growth.
Yeah,
And that often involves embracing failures.
absolutely.
And speaking of growth, Manson really drives home the importance of confronting our own mortality.
Ooh, that's getting deep.
It does. He explores the impact of death awareness on how we live our lives.
This is the final part of the book, right?
It is. He gets pretty existential.
All right, so we're back and ready to tackle this last part of the book.
Yeah, this is where it gets pretty intense.
Manson dives into the topic of death.
He does. He really goes deep.
Which, that's pretty heavy stuff.
It is, but he does it in a really thought-provoking way.
So how does he approach this?
Well, he starts by sharing a really personal story about the death of his friend Josh.
Oh, wow.
And it was clearly a pivotal moment in his life.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It forced him to confront his own mortality.
That would shake things up for sure.
It did, and he talks about how Josh's death was like this wake-up call. It made him reevaluate his priorities.
Yeah.
And really ask himself what truly mattered.
Makes sense.
It helped him overcome his fears and pursue his goals with this renewed sense of purpose.
So it's like facing death, even indirectly, can be a catalyst for growth.
Absolutely. It puts things in perspective.
Yeah, it makes you realize what's truly important.
Exactly.
So how does this tie into the whole not giving effect philosophy?
Okay, so this is where he brings in this fascinating concept.
Okay.
From the work of Ernest Becker.
Okay.
A cultural anthropologist.
Okay, I'm not familiar.
So Becker called them immortality projects.
Immortality projects, what are those?
Okay, so Becker argued that humans have this deep-seated fear of death, right?
Makes sense. I think we all do.
Yeah, so to cope with that anxiety, we create these elaborate immortality projects.
So it's like we're trying to leave something behind that will outlive us.
Exactly. Whether it's our children, our art, our careers.
The impact we have on the world.
It's all about transcending our mortality.
Wow, so it's like this fear of death is woven into so much of human behavior.
It really is.
And culture.
It drives so much of what we do.
It's like we're constantly striving for something that will make us feel immortal.
Yeah, and that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Becker also proposed this thing he called a bitter antidote.
A bitter antidote.
To this fear of death.
Okay, so what is it?
He said, instead of clinging to these immortality projects, we should actually confront our mortality head on.
Really?
Yeah, get comfortable with the idea of our own death.
So instead of trying to deny or transcend death,
right,
we should just embrace it.
As a natural part of life.
That's a big shift in perspective.
It is. But Manson suggests that this acceptance can be incredibly liberating.
How so?
Well, it frees us from the fear that drives us to create all these elaborate immortality projects in the first place.
I see.
It allows us to choose our values more freely and find meaning in the present moment.
Without being attached to some future state or legacy.
Exactly.
Does Manson offer any, practical advice?
He does.
On how to actually do that? Confront our fear of death.
Yeah, he shares this really vivid story about facing his own fear of heights.
Oh, wow.
By climbing a cliff in South Africa.
I don't know if I could do that.
It sounds terrifying.
Yeah.
But it's such a powerful metaphor for confronting any fear or limitation.
Oh, I like that.
Right. Even the ones that seem deeply ingrained.
So it's about pushing past the boundaries of our own minds.
Exactly, and recognizing that we're capable of more than we think.
I love that.
And it ties back to the core message of the book.
Okay, how so?
Choosing our struggles, taking responsibility for our choices, and focusing on what truly matters, knowing that our time here is finite.
So it's like a call to action.
It is, to live intentionally.
And make choices that align with our values.
Yeah, knowing that our actions have the potential to create ripples that extend far beyond our own lives.
It's a reminder that even in the face of death, we have the power to choose how we live.
Exactly.
And what legacy we leave behind.
And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the subtle art of not giving a feck.
This has been such an insightful conversation.
It really has.
We covered so much ground.
From choosing our battles to confronting our mortality.
I feel like I have a lot to think about now.
Me too.
Hopefully our listeners have gained some valuable takeaways from this.
Yeah, about how to live more intentionally and prioritize what truly matters.
And make choices that align with their values.
Absolutely.
And for those who want to explore even more books that inspire personal growth and development,
yes,
we highly recommend checking out The Growth Reads.
You can find them at thegrowthreads.com.
They offer in-depth summaries, key takeaways, and thought-provoking discussions on a wide range of books that can help you on your journey of self-discovery.
They're a great resource.
So keep diving deep, keep questioning your assumptions, and keep choosing your fricks wisely.
Couldn't have said it better myself.